the dimly lit corners of a local bar, where the air was thick with the scent of stale beer and old cigarette smoke, a conversation began. "Who's the most sinister, the most vile soul you've ever heard of?" a man named Brett asked, nursing his drink. "Ramirez, Berkowitz, or maybe some of those international nightmares like Stalin or Eye.My." The patrons around him murmured, each with their own opinion. But Brett continued. "You see, all these names, as monstrous as they were, they all had one thing in common. They were human. They were flesh and blood, driven by twisted ideals or some dark urge to rebel against the norms of society. It's a strange thing, isn't it? How a human can be so inhuman." His friend, a man with grizzled hair and a scar running down his cheek, leaned in. "But you see, Brett, those monsters, as dark as they were, they never truly lost themselves. They might have danced on the edge of the abyss, maybe even dipped a toe in, but they never fully jumped." Brett nodded. "That's why they were caught, right? Because deep down, some shred of humanity remained. But what if I told you there were those who had completely lost themselves? Those who had become something other?" The bar grew silent, the only sound being the soft hum of the neon lights and the distant chatter from a television. "We call them the abyss beings, or just abyssals. They're not like us, not anymore. Maybe they were once, but something changed them. Maybe they were born with a darkness inside, or perhaps they were touched by something supernatural. Hell, for all we know, they could be demons summoned by some foolhardy ritual." Brett took a deep breath. "But the point is, they exist, and they're not just mad. They're beyond comprehension, beyond any realm of sanity we know." His friend raised an eyebrow. "Sounds like a story, Brett." Brett smirked. "You'd think so, wouldn't you? But there's a place, hidden from the world, where these abyssals are kept. Far away in the Atlantic, beneath an unassuming island, lies a prison called the Abyss. It's not like any prison you've heard of. It's a place designed to hold pure, unadulterated evil. If these abyssals were ever let loose, humanity wouldn't stand a chance." He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. This isn't just about being criminally insane. These beings are on another level of madness. And the government, they'd do anything to keep this place a secret. He leaned back. "Last I heard, there were 42 of these abyssals locked up. But who knows how many more are out there? The cells, they're like fortresses, each tailored to its occupant. And if one ever got out, well, there's an arsenal waiting for them. But between you and me, I doubt it'd be enough." His friend looked skeptical. "And why are you telling me this?" Brett smirked. "Because, my friend, I used to be one of the guards there. And let me tell you, it's not the abyssals you should be afraid of. It's the secrets that place holds." The government, with its labyrinthine corridors of power and secrets, had a plan for the unthinkable. If the situation at the abyss ever spiraled out of control, they had a final card to play. They'd call in the big guns, a group known only as Alpha Abyss Strike Squad, or AASS for those in the know. I'd never seen them in action, and frankly, I never wanted to. Their presence meant the world was on the brink of chaos. If you ever saw them, it meant your day had gone from bad to apocalyptic. So you might be wondering, why am I spilling these top-secret beans? Why risk everything? Well, let's just say I've got a gut feeling that by sundown, I might not be around to face the consequences, and even if I do survive this mess, life as I know it is over. So here's my story. It was a day like any other. I was on duty, watching over a man named Peter Jennings. Doesn't sound too intimidating, right? But we didn't call him by that name. This average-looking man, standing at 5'7" and weighing 135 pounds, had a terrifying ability. He could teleport. One moment you'd be looking into his cold, lifeless eyes, and the next, he'd vanish, only to reappear right behind you. It was unsettling, to say the least. And the worst part? He seemed invincible. Bullets, knives, nothing seemed to faze him. But compared to some of the other abyssals, he was almost mild. That day, after my shift, I headed to the lunchroom. I met up with my friend Bennett. We weren't the chatty type, but he was one of the few guards I could stand. Most of the others, they were a bit off, probably a side effect of working in such a place. Just as I was about to dig into my chili, alarms blared. The automated voice echoed a word that sent chills down my spine. Bennett and I exchanged a horrified glance. This wasn't good. I'd only ever experienced one minor breach before. It was the doctor's scalpel. He managed to get 8 miles off the coast, leaving a trail of 145 bodies in his wake. It took us days to get him back and weeks to repair the damage. But that was just one abyssal. If multiple abyssals were on the loose, we'd be in deep trouble. There had been one major breach in the abyss's history, where 8 abyssals escaped. That was the only time ASS was called in. It happened a dozen years ago, long before I joined the ranks. The details of that event were above my pay grade, but I could only imagine the horror. We had protocols for breaches, a thick manual detailing every step to take. But in that moment, with the alarms ringing in my ears, all I could think was, are we prepared for what's coming? The breach manual? I'd skimmed through it once, and it was a joke. The entire thing seemed to be written with the idea that we were just expendable, mere pawns in this twisted game. If you followed that manual to the letter, you'd be signing your own death warrant. Amidst the chaos, voices shouted, trying to make sense of the situation. "What the hell do we do now?" one guard yelled. Most of us just exchanged panicked glances, unsure of our next move. But not Swanson. I never liked the guy. He always acted like he was the hero in some action-packed blockbuster. "Finally, some action!" he shouted, a manic grin stretching across his face. Without waiting for a response, he grabbed his rifle and flung the door open. But what awaited him outside wasn't what he expected. It was Ruffy the Rottweiler. Imagine a man in a filthy, oversized dog costume, standing at a towering 7'2", with a voice that was a chilling blend of deep, raspy, and childlike. That was Ruffy. Swanson's bravado melted away the instant he met Ruffy's gaze. We'd only ever seen this creature through the safety of a monitor. Ruffy's movements were unnerving, switching between running and crawling, his oversized paws crushing anything in his path. The last image I have of that room was Ruffy, forcing the remaining guards to play a grotesque game of fetch with a dismembered arm. I ran, my heart pounding, as the facility descended into chaos. Our squad leaders were scrambling, trying to assemble some form of resistance. But it was futile. Sure, we were the best of the best, hand-picked from elite military and intelligence backgrounds. Against human threats, we were unmatched. But these creatures, they were beyond our comprehension. We were trained to face the evils of the world, not the nightmares of the unknown. As I navigated the maze-like corridors, I stumbled upon a group of guards, strangely calm, peering over a railing. "What's going on?" I panted. Jasper, a guard I recognized, turned to me with a wicked grin. "You're going to want to see this," he said, gesturing below. I found myself looking down into the weight room, a state-of-the-art gym, but my focus was on one man, Alexei Durovich. He was a mountain of a man, and he seemed to have grown even larger since I last saw him. Rumor had it that some experiment had been done on him, but whatever it was, it had gone too far. Alexei was now a force to be reckoned with, and I had a sinking feeling he was about to become the center of this nightmare. Alexei, with his Herculean strength, was in the midst of lifting an almost supernatural amount of weight when the weight room's door creaked open. The figure that entered was known as Saul. Standing tall at 6'2", his physique was impressive, reminiscent of a bodybuilder. But it wasn't his build that was unsettling. It was the grotesque scars that crisscrossed his body, and the fact that half of his face was missing, replaced by an exposed skull. Red electrical currents pulsed through the bones, a deadly energy that could turn anything it touched into a smoldering pile of ash. I could tell from the reactions around me that many hadn't done their homework on Saul. Alexei, for all his might, was outmatched. He hurled a weight plate at Saul, which hit with a sickening thud. But it was a futile effort. As Saul lunged forward, Alexei tried to tackle him, a fatal mistake. The moment Saul's electrified fingers touched Alexei's skin, the giant's body convulsed, and within moments he was reduced to a charred heap on the floor. The room was filled with a stunned silence, broken only by the distant sounds of chaos echoing through the facility. But that silence was soon shattered by the unmistakable sounds of heavy footsteps and the cracking of bones. All eyes turned to the corridor's entrance, where a metal door was suddenly dented from the outside, With a deafening crash, the door was blown off its hinges, revealing another nightmare. Chainface. Standing at an imposing 60'6", Chainface was a grotesque figure. His head, save for a single eye, was wrapped in rusty barbed wire. He looked like a deranged greaser from the 80s, complete with a leather jacket, jeans, and a pompadour. But the most terrifying thing about him was his weapon, a bat wrapped in the same barbed wire that adorned his head. Rumor had it that if the bat's blow didn't kill you, the infections from the rusty wire would. I couldn't help but wonder, how had this happened? How had so many abyssals escaped at once? But there was no time for questions. Chainface was advancing, and my instincts screamed at me to run. As I turned to flee, my eyes locked with Saul's from below. My heart raced, and I pushed through the crowd, desperate to escape the immediate threat. Throughout my career, I'd faced countless dangers, but nothing compared to this. The adrenaline that once sharpened my senses now threatened to overwhelm me. The abyss, once a place of order and containment, had become a house of horrors. The adrenaline coursing through my veins was a double-edged sword. It kept me moving, but it also clouded my judgment. Lost in my thoughts, I was jolted back to reality when a forceful arm collided with my chest, sending me sprawling to the ground. Looking up, I found myself staring into the eyes of Zahir, another guard. His presence wasn't much of a relief. "Why the rush?" he sneered, a smirk playing on his lips. "Isn't this a breach? Why not stand and fight?" I shot him a glare, trying to sidestep him, but he was quick, grabbing my collar and pinning me to the wall. I wasn't about to be manhandled. Using the combat training I'd received, I elbowed his wrist, loosening his grip, and followed with a knee to his gut. I tried to land a blow to his neck, but he caught my wrist, chuckling. "Nice try," he taunted, his voice dripping with sarcasm. But the approaching sounds of Chainface's footsteps seemed to snap him back to reality. "Looks like we'll have to finish this later," he said, releasing me. I didn't stick around to see what he planned to do next. Picking myself up, I continued my desperate escape. The chaos around me was deafening, but amidst the noise, I heard a familiar voice on my radio. It was Bennett. "Where are you, man?" he asked. I responded, and he directed me to Sector D. Reaching Sector D, I found it to be a madhouse. I tried to spot Bennett amidst the chaos, but it was nearly impossible. As I searched, a chilling sensation washed over me, as if the very ground beneath me was pulling me down. I didn't need to look to know the source. Duskter, standing at a towering 9'5". He was a nightmarish figure, faceless and draped in a black robe. His mere presence seemed to drain the life out of anyone who got too close. I watched in horror as guards, drawn into his deadly radius, froze in place, blood streaming from their eyes. Desperate to avoid a similar fate, I turned to flee, only to come face to face with another horror. The Phantom Soldier. Standing at 5'8", he was a grotesque figure in a tattered SS uniform, his face hidden behind a cracked gas mask. The legends about him were numerous, each more terrifying than the last. I was trapped between two nightmares, and time was running out. The Phantom Soldier's cold, lifeless eyes stared into mine, his hand gripping that cursed blade that seemed to defy all logic in its indestructibility. In his other hand, he held a hose connected to a tank, spewing a dark, searing flame. The legend spoke of the unbearable agony it inflicted. I felt trapped, with the only escape being a leap over the rail into the writhing mass of bodies below. But just as despair threatened to consume me, a hand grabbed my sleeve. I nearly jumped out of my skin, but it was Bennett, emerging from a concealed door in the wall. "Move," he hissed, pulling me into the darkness with him. The door shut behind us, and we were enveloped in an inky blackness. "Where are we?" I whispered, trying to make sense of our surroundings. Bennett flicked on his phone's flashlight, revealing a hidden corridor. "No idea," he replied, "but it's our best shot right now." The distant roar of the Phantom Soldier's flamethrower echoed behind us, urging us to move faster. We found ourselves in what looked like a makeshift surveillance room. Monitors were haphazardly arranged, wires tangled everywhere. It didn't look official, more like someone's secret hideout. I scanned the screens, each displaying the chaos unfolding throughout the prison. Guards were being torn apart, some fighting, others fleeing. but all meeting the same gruesome end. The doctor's scalpel was performing a macabre operation on an unfortunate soul, while Ruffy treated a severed head like a chew toy. But one screen caught my attention: Chainface and Saul in a tense standoff. It dawned on me then, the Abyssals weren't just after us. They'd turn on each other too. A twisted smile formed on my lips. Maybe, just maybe, they'd do our job for us. My hope grew as I watched the Phantom Soldier unleash his black flames on Duskter, who struggled against the onslaught. Maybe these monsters weren't as invincible as we thought. But hope, especially in a place like this, is fleeting. Even if only one Abyssal remained, it would be the most formidable of them all. We couldn't hide forever. Our fate was uncertain, but for now, all we could do was watch the horror unfold and hope for a miracle.